About Beer receives underwriting support from Rheingeist Brewing. They understand the importance of independent journalism in the beer space, and their support helps fund original work. Learn how you can affordably support journalists by visiting allaboutbeer.com/support.
Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Holl. There is a lot of Czech-style lager in the world these days, being made by breweries of all sizes. Chris Lohring of Notch Brewing in Massachusetts has been studying and brewing the styles for years, and he's here with an education that benefits us all. But first up, two quick event notices. First up, All About Beer is thrilled to once again be participating in the Little Beers Festival. It's the 5th anniversary of it. Hosted by Goodword Brewing in the charming town of Duluth, Georgia. Tickets are now on sale for the March 29th event. It's one of the best beer festivals in the country, and you should get your tickets now before it sells out. Go to goodwordbrewing.com/events. And this summer, All About Beer is headed to the Black Fly Beer Camp at Great Camp Sagamore in the Adirondack Mountains. Join us in a host of breweries for weekends of tasting, meals, education, and fellowship. I'll be there. M. Souter will be there. Nate Schweber will be there, plus so many others. Visit sagamore.org to get your tickets. And as you're no doubt aware, the fires in the Los Angeles area were devastating. And as per usual, when natural disasters strike, brewers are stepping up with a special beer. Common Space Brewing Company is spearheading the effort, and you can learn more about the beer and how you can help by following the Instagram account at WeLoveLABeer. And Western North Carolina can still use support. The North Carolina Craft Brewers Guild is organizing a fundraising effort called Pouring for Neighbors to benefit breweries that were affected by Hurricane Helene. Learn more by visiting drinkncbeer.org. Additionally, I hope you'll consider supporting All About Beer. There's a number of ways you can do it. Through our Patreon, through our underwriting, and through our advertising. The only way that we can continue to bring you original shows like this or the All About Beer podcast and articles on our site is through your support. Please go visit allaboutbeer.com/support to learn more. And thanks to this episode's sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Stomp Stickers. Stomp is a proud member of the Brewers Association that produces a wide variety of printed brewery products, such as beer labels, keg collars, coasters, beer boxes, and much more. Stomp's website features an easy-to-use digital design tool, low-quantity orders, fast turnaround times, and free domestic shipping. Visit stompstickers.com and use code ThinkBeer for 15% off of your first order. Admittedly, when I started writing about beer 20 or so years ago, I focused mainly on beers being made in the US and didn't give foreign beer the attention it deserved. I've been trying to make up for lost time ever since, with trips to Belgium, Germany, the UK, and beyond. The Czech Republic is still a place I haven't properly explored, and that needs to change, especially since so many breweries are embracing the various styles that come out of that country. For a history lesson, an exploration of process, and a dive into the culture, I recently sat down with Chris Lohring. He's the owner of Notch Brewing in Salem and Brighton, Massachusetts, and a Czech beer enthusiast. We were both at the New England Brewing Summit in Portland, Maine last week, where he was giving a talk on Czech beer. So I used the opportunity to sit down for a chat. The bell has rung. Professor Lohring's class is now in session. I was thinking, though, when I first started writing about beer, and I was young and an idiot, one of my first bios was covering the culture of American beer. And because there's so much happening 25 years ago in the U.S. scene that, me and my infinite fucking wisdom thought, I don't need to be paying attention to, Belgian beer or, beer from the U.K. or the Czech Republic. It was I'm going to focus on American-made beer and American beer and that. And I was an idiot, right? So I feel like I'd be in a much stronger position as a journalist now had I put in the work back in the early days, really going through the Jackson stuff and really going through some of the other stuff and understanding the world's beer so that I could have better understood American beer. Huh, yeah. So I'm coming still at this from, I read a lot and I try to, taste as much as I can and talk to the smart people about it. But I feel like now that Czech beer is everywhere, that that there is in the U.S. here, right, that there is various interpretations of what it can be, what it should be. Folks are trying to dig up historical stuff, or they're just like, they saw a recipe online and they're just trying to make it their own, or something like that. So this is sort of my long-winded lead up of there's a lot that I don't know. And did you intend, when you first started brewing these styles, to become the American voice of Czech beers?
No, I thought we would largely be ignored, like we were for like the first 5 years when we were doing it. Nobody had any interest, even brewers.
Yeah, so what changed? Or I guess one, what led you to them in the first place?
Well, what led me to it was I brewed British style beers exclusively for over 10 years of my career when I first got into it.
Yeah.
And my company was sold to a competitor, and I had, for the first time in a while, had some time to be on my own. I went to the Czech Republic because I saw that Michael Jackson video from 1989.
Yeah.
And it always stuck in my head that the process there was like nothing I've ever seen. So I went to the Czech Republic and drank beer in the Golden Tiger and just wondered why these beers aren't being talked about in the United States. I mean, not even on the radar. And that Czech beer was thought about as being this monolithic, one thing, 5% Pilsner. And when you go there, you realize, oh, that's not even the most popular beer. The most popular beer is a 10 Plato, 4% pale lager.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just, that really was an epiphany for me. So when I started Notch, I was focusing on low and modest ABV beers, and it made sense to me that the country that produces the most of it and drinks the most of it is the Czech Republic, and I wanted to focus on that. And I also wanted a challenge away from British beer. I'd done British beer.
You could do it in your sleep, yeah.
There was no real challenge left for me. And anyone who's brewed British beer, like, you understand that, where the Czech process was so difficult to understand, and the nuances were so great, and the language barrier was pretty large, right? So it was a challenge,
Yeah.
So I think that was like my motivation was present a beer that is low ABV, has heritage to it, not a gimmick, and is really fun to brew.
The not a gimmick part, I want to bite at that one, but it's, there's the tradition and the history of it is, or how critically important is it to what you're making now?
I mean, I don't know if it's critically important to the consumer. At the end of the day, the consumer wants something that's flavorful and good and meets their needs for what they want in that moment.
Okay.
Right? That story might be part of that. It may not. So I'm not really sure how much that comes into play. It does for me.
Yeah.
Because I want to, when I get into something, I want to have interest in it. I want to be challenged, and as brewers, we like process, and a lot of us are engineers or, in some kind of science background, and these are things we like to do.
Yeah.
Ideally, you can find a home for that, and you can find a business for that, if you're lucky.
So when you first started making these at Notch, beers in the Czech tradition, where did you start?
I started in 2011. We released a 10 Plato 4% pale lager that in the Czech Republic is known as Desítka, which is the American version, of American language would be tenor. And that's the most widely consumed beer there. You won't find it in the tourist areas of Prague that's dominated by Pilsner Urquell. But that's the beer that I drank the most when I was there, and that's the beer I released in the United States in 2011. And I'll never forget posting stuff in social media, and I think there was a larger publication that picked it up. I want to say the New York Times possibly, because lower ABV beers were starting to get some traction.
Yeah.
And there were brewers commenting on, I called it session pills. Let me take a step back. I call it session pills because no one's drinking Desítka, no one's drinking tenor.
Right.
And so...
because they don't know what it is.
They don't know what it is.
So you have to, yeah.
ABVs weren't even that widely available in beer menus and restaurants.
Sure.
And on labels a little bit.
Yeah. Well, because all beer was 5%.
Yeah.
Or
right.
4 or 3.2.
Yeah. Right. So when we released that, brewers were saying, well, all Pilsners are session beers. I'm like, well, no, they're not. And actually, in the place that actually originated this style, they have different strengths of Pilsner, what they call pale lager. So I knew I was up against it. Brewers couldn't even understand what I was doing, right? So I was like, all right, that's why for 5 years we were alone. But back to your question, the reason why Czech lager became popular is because the Czech government did probably one of the smartest things that they could have done. The Czech, I'm going to get this wrong, but the Czech Department of Ministry of Agriculture, I kind of screwed that up a little bit.
Yeah.
Put in place a program to bring brewers over to expose them to Czech brewing. Paid for the trip, the whole deal. and they cherry picked brewers in the United States and did a good job of it. Ones who were influential, were well known, and those brewers came back and started brewing Czech beer. And that started it, without question. That was the tip of the iceberg. And I'm over here looking at this being like, hey, you're getting free trips. I didn't get a free trip.
Yeah.
You know? But that's okay, because I was happy with that, because it's easier when you have a group of folks, especially those who are reputable and have a voice. It's easy for all of us to get more recognition. You know, when you go it alone, it's impossible.
Yeah. Has the messaging changed on the beers?
Oh, yeah. We don't call it session beer anymore.
Okay.
We don't need to. ABVs on every beer menu. It's on all packaging. The consumer now understands ABVs. They look for it.
Yeah.
So session was a shorthand just to get people to go, hey, this is different. And the session also got kind of beat up a little bit with the session IPA craze. There were a lot of bad ones.
Yes.
So we backed away from even using the term anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it also allowed us to breathe a little bit. And because we brew really cool, Czech and Franconian style lagers, a lot of those are over the session strength. So we didn't want to totally push ourselves into a corner. We wanted to breathe a little bit, and that allowed us to do that. But still, primarily, most of our beers are under 4.5%.
Yeah. Those trips, and I know they're still happening, right?
Yeah, not as with much frequency, but they're still happening.
Okay, yeah, I know a couple of brewers went last year or the year before or something like that, and I saw.
And Anna, from a lead brewer at Notch, actually participated in that a few years ago.
Okay.
So we got
finally
in on it. Finally.
Yeah. To your knowledge, what are they instilling on folks, that they're coming back with this, knowledge or the interest in, to make it themselves and to put it out into the world? You say they're doing a good job with the outreach and everything else like that, but there must be something about this program if you're saying it's responsible for much of the growth of the category here.
I think there's a couple things. Brewers, at the end of the day, drink beers that are lower ABV but flavorful. That's what we drink. All right, we're not sitting down with an 8% double IPA.
No.
So one, it's the brewers that really take a shine to these styles, and also the service. It's much different, and like Belgium or even the UK, like in Germany, in the Czech Republic, and they serve beer in a way that's very honored, and it's important to them. Dense, creamy foam, a lot of foam, things you don't see here. So there's the service aspect too, which I think brewers really get excited by.
Yeah.
So I think it's a combination of all, and then the history too. The history of the brewing there goes really deep. They created Pilsner, so I just think that a lot of brewers just didn't get exposure to it. The U.S. beer scene grew up with a mash tun / lauter tun and a brew kettle, and we could only do single temperature infusion beers, and we did ales, we did British, because quite frankly they were capital, they were ease of capital. There was a low cost of entry, where if you start brewing 2-liter Czech lager, the cost of entry is much higher. The capital expenditure is much higher.
By how much?
Well, it depends how complicated you want to get in your brew house.
Okay.
It's piping to move mash around. It's additional decoction vessel or multi-use vessel. If you want to do open fermentation, that's a whole ball of wax that people aren't familiar with. Horizontal lagering tanks.
Sure.
So it depends how involved you want to get. It depends how true you want to stay to Czech beer.
So, because that's been, as we've seen the quote-unquote rise of lagers in the craft space, right? I still walk into a lot of breweries that have a lager program that are still using conicals or, are doing it sort of with the equipment that they have. But in that traditional aspect, in these tried and true methods, can you taste the difference from brewery to brewery if they're doing it, the way that you want, the way that you're doing it, or I think of Sacred Profane and how they're doing it, and Cohesion and a few of the others that have fully gone into to commit to this versus, somebody who is interested in making them, putting them out there. Is there a noticeable difference?
It's hard to
from
do
your
it.
Experience
It's hard to do it. So there's not one thing that makes Czech lager great.
Sure.
Right? It's a combination of 25 things. So if you can get to 20 of them, you're going to make a pretty damn good beer. If you do 5 of them, it's going to be a little bit, you're going to be lacking a little bit. So I don't have an answer for what the secret sauce is. Decoction makes a big deal, although I've had really great American versions of Czech lager that don't decoct because they're really good lager producers, right?
Sure.
So that helps. So I think it depends on your skill level and your ability to understand what your goals are. I mean, Czech lagers they have a high residual the attenuation is not high, right? The yeast character is very expressive. There's a lot of malty, bready, biscuity character from decoction. Mostly when you do a fermentation that is not with hydrostatic pressure, open fermentation, or with CO2 pressure, the yeast expresses itself more. You're not making a clean beer. It has some rustic to it, some rustic notes to it. And then the carbonations, are you doing horizontal lagering, are you doing spunding? And if you're doing pinpoint carbonation or using a carb stone, you're going to get different carbonation, and you're not going to be happy with the results. So, all these things kind of come into play. I just really ran on a lot there.
No. But I, there is so much to it, right? And it's not just a one size fits all thing. And
all right.
I'm thinking that so much of the American drinker, still what they know is Pilsner Urquell, right? And you've opened up, and other brewers have sort of opened up all of these other styles to American drinkers as well. And I'm just walk me through the other options that are out there these days.
Well, Pilsner Urquell is an interesting one because, if you go to the Czech Republic and you just spend a weekend there, you're going to have Pilsner Urquell and Budvar. And the two are very, very, very different.
Yes.
Right? Budvar almost tastes like a Helles. It's like 22 IBUs. I don't particularly care for it. It's really well made.
Yeah.
It's clean as a whistle. Pilsner Urquell is a lot more bitter. It's like, the IBUs are in the 40s. It has a lot more diacetyl than Budvar, which is either love or hate. And the degrees of diacetyl in that beer can vary depending on where you get it. So, if you step outside of those two and start going to some of the regional breweries or smaller breweries, you're going to get a pretty wide range of styles. Or not styles. If you say, let's say it's like a 10 or 12 Plato beer.
Right.
4 to 5%, and it's a Czech pale lager. It's almost like a category. It's almost as if they don't talk to each other. Some are dry and bitter. Some are malty and sweet. And this is just in pale.
Sure.
I'm not talking about, dark lagers. So I find that fascinating that they have a process that they all feel like if it's Czech lager, you have to go by. But it's not really about, like you would have in the United States, it's like it has to be this SRM and these IBUs and within this flavor profile, or you're going to get kicked out of the judging. I mean, Czech brewers would get kicked out of their own judging, if that was brought to the United States. Most of them wouldn't even pass the BJCP. The acronym always escapes me. It would, or if you go to the GABF, you get kicked out.
Sure.
Right? So I find that fascinating and interesting. Why Czech beer is so fascinating to me. Like, there's not not a monolithic expression of what a pale lager or a pilsner should be.
Yeah.
It's up to the brewer. That's great. It reminds me a lot of Franconia too. Right? The Franconia lager brewers they have there are more categories and styles. Zwickel beer, Ungespund, and then Keller beer.
Yeah.
You ask a brewer what those mean, they all have different answers for you.
Yeah.
It's all based on the region, and they could be pale, they could be dark, they could be amber. None of them are the same. But in our heads, we all think it's Mars.
Sure. So
Mars the brewery, not the planet.
So then in thinking over the last 15 or so years, since, you started doing these and started putting these out, have you settled on what your interpretation of the beers that you're putting out is?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a palate that is in tune with certain things in the way I like to enjoy them, and that comes into balance. That comes into all the factors I just talked about. I don't like diacetyl.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask about the role that diacetyl plays, because there's certain brewers that lean into it because they say, well, it's it's the traditional part of the profile.
In this talk I'm going to give in Czech Lager later in the day, I talk a lot about diacetyl.
Okay.
Is it intended by the brewer? Right.
Sure.
I don't know if it is, and a lot of that has to do with the history of Czech Lager, how they produced it, and then when they became a free market country, they had to turn tanks all of a sudden. So I'm not going to go into
You
it
have
here.
a very wry smile as you're talking about this right now. I just,
Again, I don't know. Is it intended is a really big question. Right? I know Pilsner Urquell will tell you it's intended. They have a parts per billion target they hit.
Yeah.
And when you have Pilsner Urquell at tank pubs in Prague, you're going to get nothing to everything. The range is insane.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me that's intentional. I'm sorry. It's just not.
Yeah.
And when it leaves the brewery, I know it's out of their hands, right?
Sure.
So So back to your question, I don't like diacetyl, so we don't have it in the beers. The consumer doesn't like it. I like it in very, very small amounts, very, very small amounts. But I don't like it when it overwhelms all the other process inputs that allow these other attributes to come into the beer to become overwhelmed. That bready character you get from decoction gets wiped out with diacetyl. Like, why even decoct?
Yeah.
So that's me. That's my personal like. That's not right or wrong.
Yeah.
I do like beers that I hate the term crispy, because to me when I have crispy beers in the United States, they're thin, astringent, and bitter. It's not pleasant, or they're bland.
Yeah.
Right? I like beers with character and distinction, and so we use yeasts that are expressive, and we use that yeast in a way that allows it to be expressive. Right? And I think that's really an important part of the great lager. Again, the Franconia region always comes to mind because they're very similar. Just stylistically, they're a little bit different. So we don't try to replicate a certain beer. We replicate process, and then we even change our process to adapt to what's practical. We use open fermentation, but we also use unitanks because we need to recapture the yeast in an efficient way. So we do open fermentation for 3/4 of the fermentation, then we move it to a unitank, and we splend and then grab the yeast. That's totally not Czech.
Right.
It's a little bit of German, right? And then we move it to a lagering tank. So we have this process that was developed because we got everything we want from a flavor perspective from the process, but it also allowed us to be practical, right? Because there's certain processes that, they sound cool, like cool ship for instead of a whirlpool. I know Dovetail does that. All these other things. Like at some point, I'm like, well, all right, I want brewers to want to work here. Like it can only be so labor.
You're big on employee retention.
You can only be so labor intensive,
I don't know. I think
I say that fondly about Dovetail too.
Yeah.
Their beers are awesome.
But. And I guess that sort of speaks to what you were saying before of like everybody's doing it sort of their own way, and then it lands in the intended category regardless of
Yeah. I mean, so it's an interesting question. And Jack from Jack's Abbey was giving the talk on Modern Lager, and they were pumping their book. They're better business people than me. Like, I got nothing to sell today. But they were giving a talk, and Jack's point, was just that. It's like, what is Czech beer in the United States?
Yeah.
It's a really good question.
I'm thinking about, I think the last time I was here at this hotel was the Craft Malt Conference, maybe 2 years ago. And I was asked to moderate a panel with brewers, some who use exclusively craft malt, some who use commercial and then not. And then one brewer, Mike Fava, was, I'm never going to use craft malt. I'm only going to use Czech malt exclusively. You can never change my mind. Like, and he was reveling in it. Like, he was there to have that point of view. Yeah. And I haven't talked to him, since that panel about that topic. And I don't know if he's changed his mind. But like, how important is authentic ingredients? Like what they get out of their backyard in the Czech Republic, versus what we have available to us here.
I mean, these are very good questions in the current state of our climate, and I understand where Michael's coming from. I really respect him as a brewer, and I used to be in that camp, and I'm starting to move away from it because I realize that, as the world starts to get, a little bit warmer, as I say, it's now burning. We have to be really mindful of what we're doing and how as brewers we're consuming, these inputs. So we've experimented in Notch this year with local ingredients or local malts or U.S. malts that are heirloom varieties, barley heirloom varieties from the Czech Republic grown in the United States. And so Andrea at Valley Malt is doing a program now and supplying us with some. And we just started. We're only in 2 or 3 batches so far, but wildly flavorful. Right? Are they different than Czech malt? Absolutely. But again, flavorful. And then Sugar Creek out of the Midwest, we got some of their varieties. We just started, using those because I want to see if we can replicate Czech malt here. I mean, floor malting is not the end all, the be all. To me, what's important is the heirloom variety that's grown for flavor, and then can have a lower modification to take advantage of decoction. So I think that's really important that we find that we can get that locally. And if we're asking our consumer to buy local, right? Why are we bringing our ingredients?
Buy local from your tap room?
Yeah, why are we bringing ingredients from all over the world? Right? Like we should hold up our end of that deal. It's been hard because there hasn't been a lot of varieties to replicate Czech Lager, and that's why I haven't used it. But now they're starting to become available.
Yeah.
Again, because now there's a lot more people in here brewing Czech Lager.
Yeah, and looking for
that. Now we can actually get it locally. That's wonderful, right? That's really great. And same with hops. I've been using Sterling forever. Though Sterling is a kind of a variant of Saaz grown in the United States, and it has the character of Czech hops, which have a high degree of woody cedar character to it that you wouldn't find otherwise. And there's a few varieties that are grown here now that you can get that. So we've been exploring that and seeing what we can do with locally grown ingredients.
Yeah. As you start having these conversations with maltsters, and as you start thinking about going local, take me 5 steps down the road of where you'd like to be with that.
If we could get all our stuff locally, a consistent malt, at a price that we can still have a margin target that is reasonable. And granted, we may pay a little bit more, but that's okay. And then again, just availability and consistency of these grains. But that takes all of us collectively to say yes. Yeah. All right. So at some point, I got to get Michael to say, yeah, we're going to buy local stuff. And we all got to say, yeah, we're not going to keep bringing Raven malt or Weyermann floor malted Czech malt. And these things are easy to order and they're consistent and the price is stable. At some point, we all have to take that leap. So nothing starts, with 100%. You just got to start. You got to start doing it. Yeah. So let's start doing it.
I mean, you as the voice of Czech beer in America, I feel, will get you the soapbox for that.
I don't know if I think I've been way surpassed by other folks with better marketing and visibility. So, but it's okay. I didn't set out to be that. So I'm happy someone else is taking that baton. Yeah.
You mentioned before about the hospitality aspect of it and the service aspect of it as well. And, I remember at some point either talking with you or reading it or, Andy Crouch telling me that, one of your few professional regrets is that you didn't become the exclusive importer for Lucre faucets back when you first brought them into the country and first had the chance to do it. Is that a fair statement?
It's the second time now in this podcast that I've admitted what a poor business person I am. So
well, and the third is implied because you're on the podcast. So let's be honest. But how much has the Lucre and the visualness of it helped the style as well?
I'm sure it's helped. The thing I liked, the reason we got Lucre. I ordered it in 2015. I wired it to Jan at Lucre. He wasn't sending anything to the United States yet. There wasn't a single brewer in the country using it. And I wired money to someone I never met, hoping a box would show up with a tower and 4 faucets, and it showed up.
That's cool,
right? And we figured out how to install it. But for me, it was I wanted to brew the beer, to a certain level of authenticity. I also wanted to serve it. I didn't want to serve it. I didn't want that disconnect that happens all over the place. You get a beautiful beer into a bar, and then it's served in a shaker. I don't even hate a shaker. It's just like there's a disconnect there, right? Yeah. So if it's at the brewery, I really wanted to represent. I want to represent the way that this beer is being served in the Czech Republic. So that was important to me, and I think it's one of the reasons why maybe Czech Lager in particular has gotten a lot of notoriety is because it's visually it's when you pour that you get it. It's all right.
It's Instagrammable.
It's Instagrammable.
Yeah.
The whole Mliko foam situation. If you want views, the one thing I'm really good at is getting views on social media because all you can do is throw up a Mliko and you got a conversation for days.
Is it a conversation or is it just?
No, it's arguing.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah,
it's like politics.
Do you just do it when you're in a feisty mood? And you just want to unload on because those comments are fantastic.
No, we're low on content. We have no events coming up, so we throw up a Mliko post, and we're good for a couple of weeks.
All right, I want to talk about foam in a second, but yeah, let's get back. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think I also hate the Lucre faucets as much as I love them because once they became popular, everyone started buying them and using them. Have no idea how to use them. So I remember I went to another local brewery and they had a Lucre pour on the beer list, and I got one, and it came stadium pour and a tulip. I was like, okay, what are we doing?
All right, so how are people doing it wrong?
I'm going to answer that in the context of how Lucre wants the faucets to be used.
Okay.
Right. So I don't know what's wrong, right? But as intended by the manufacturer,
yes,
right, is you pour foam first, dense creamy foam first. Then at a certain point, depending on the glassware you have, you then pour clear beer underneath that foam till it reaches its rim.
Yeah, by submerging
the faucet in the beer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it does a couple things. One is it creates a really wonderful, dense, creamy foam that has a lot of hop character in it. And then it keeps the beer carbonated, and because you're pouring without a lot of agitation to clear beer, so you're getting a really good carbonated beer below that foam.
Yeah.
With a slow pour, which has also become popular, and Lucre is not for slow pours.
Right.
Like, they can be used for them, but that's not the intent of the faucet. The slow pours knock a lot of carbonation out.
Yeah.
Right, and so that's a different experience. So they're very, very different.
Is that on a shirt? Like, Lucre's not for slow pours? I feel like, or a bumper sticker or something. I feel like I've either heard you say it before and I love it, or I've seen it somewhere.
I'm cautious of that because there's some there's some great brewers using Lucre for slow pours, and
yes,
that's up to them. Like,
yeah,
there's no right or wrong with that.
Yeah.
It's just when everyone thinks that's what they're for. It's like, all right, we just got, hey, folks, come on.
Right.
The intent is this.
Yeah.
Right? You can pour 10 half liters in a minute.
Yeah.
Right? You don't need to pour one every 8 minutes.
It's some business decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's fine, right? But again, as Lucre intends, that's what I just described.
Yeah.
So we go with that intention.
And your servers go through pretty rigorous training.
Yeah.
When they're doing, and some of it and I mentioned the submerging the faucet because there's something about beer in America where you don't do that for your Bud Light. Like, you don't want to see a bartender do that type of thing. So it feels air quotes wrong when you see it done, except for that's
right.
the intended purpose.
And for the most part, that's correct, because faucets are difficult. American faucets are difficult to clean.
Yes.
All right. Not externally, but internally, up to the mechanism. And so, those get cleaned periodically. But, you don't want to dip your beer into there over the course of service. Also, a lot of bars reuse their glasses, which is disgusting. Right. So that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, yes.
But these faucets are designed to be easily taken apart, cleaned, sanitized, etc. So they're designed for that. And the first year we were in business, we had cicerones coming in telling us how we're doing it wrong, and we had to, I get it, cicerone alert. That's my joke, but that wasn't in the curriculum because it didn't exist in the United States. So
right.
It's not their fault. That's what they were taught, and so we had to just, with as much care and passion as we could, and understanding, just walk them through what we were doing. Right? Has the cicerone program caught up with Lucre's yet?
I don't know. Yeah. I've told this story before, but I took the certified beer server online test, I don't know, 15 years ago, like whenever they first started doing it.
Did you fail?
No, I took it fairly well buzzed and got a 98 on it. Because Ray Daniels kept bothering me to do it. He was like, I really want your feedback. And it's like, aced your test, old man, like something like that, and I, sent off like a half drunk text. And he goes, got your $95, son. And I was like, touche. So that's I'm
pretty sure I would fail that miserably.
That's about as far as I got. No, it's all, it's a pretty easy test.
Yeah, okay.
Didn't Alex Kidd make one of his cohorts do it in the back of a speeding car? It was like some pre-COVID.
It sounds like something he would do.
Yeah, it was amazing. I think they brought him up the canyon in a Maserati or something, in the back seat of a convertible, and made him do the certified beer server. And if this is not true, they need to do it.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense in all the right ways.
But when you're training your staff, right, how quickly, if you've had somebody who's had previous bartending experience, how quickly do they get over that apprehension of...
It takes some time. I think the big apprehension is everyone's afraid to waste beer.
Okay.
Right? We're all bartenders are wired. All servers are wired that way. Don't waste beer. It's a great response to have when you're teaching someone how to use a Luker. You gotta suspend that and be like, we're gonna waste a lot of beer here.
Okay.
You're gonna have a lot of, we bring in some regulars and they stand at the end of the bar and they get all the mistakes. Right?
Sure.
We in our training for new folks, sometimes it takes a couple weeks for them to get really comfortable with it, and we just let them practice as much as they want. And then every quarter we bring all our staff in and we have competitions and go, and we'll waste a keg at least in trying to do it, and then someone will win the best pour. So it just takes time. In my talk today, one of the things I do talk about the Luker a little bit, and I said if you don't have time for training, just don't install one. It's pretty. But you're going to disappoint the customer who really knows what it's supposed to be if you can't do it repeatedly, and it's difficult. Yeah.
And upkeep as well, right?
And upkeep,
it's
yeah.
I feel like I've walked into your place multiple times and just seen the faucets disassembled, being like it's And
it's somewhat beer style specific. At least for me, there's certain styles that are just not good on that. Right? I mean, you put a Helles on that, I wouldn't touch it. It just doesn't do it justice. So I think it really benefits from beers with good degree of bitterness, but also backing malt, that it's balanced. And to me, those are the ones that really stand out. There's just certain styles I just wouldn't put on. That's, again, not right or wrong, just my personal preference.
I'll have to find it. I got a press release maybe last year or the year before about some bar in Brooklyn that called themselves like New York City's best craft beer bar or something, and I'd never heard of it or something. But the press release was trying to get me to come out to drink High Life off of the Luker, and for $15 a pour. And it was like, I'm sorry.
I don't know if High Life's not coming out of a bottle. I really don't want it.
Yeah. You mentioned the tulip glass before, and there's certain styles that you feel don't work for it as well. How important is glassware?
I think it's important. I don't think we should have a fetish about it, but I think we should try to pay homage to styles that come in certain glassware. It's fun. Like I said, like if you give me a really good beer in a shaker, I'm not going to complain. Right? The lines are clean. It's got a little bit of foam on top. I'm okay. As long as you're not cheating me because it's you get 16 ounces on your draft menu and I get 14 ounces. Yeah. That's a different conversation. Which goes back to the Luker pour. People think they're getting ripped off. It's like, well, no, the foam's actually free. It's like you're getting full measure to this line. But that's a whole other conversation. It's hard. Now, I think glassware's important. I think it elevates beer in a way that it makes it fun and, again, pays homage to styles. And, again, sometimes we overdo it, but I'd rather overdo it than, get poured beer in dirty glassware that people don't care about.
Going back to foam, Milko pours, I know you guys do that quite a bit. There's other breweries that, feature it on their menu. You guys have it on the chalkboard up at the at Brighton, I know. It's been a while since I've been to Salem, but are there regular drinkers on that, or is it the tourists coming through who are like confused and they just want the experience? Like who's ordering that regularly?
It's usually beer fans that they've seen it on Instagram, they've read about it, they follow either us or other lager brewers. They're aware of trends and they want to just check it out. It's a really low cost of entry to try this thing, right? It's half price of what the normal beer is, and there's not if you don't like it, you don't like it. You're out $4.
Sure.
We have a couple that come in and they get Milko pours, but they don't drink them right away, and they let the foam turn to beer, which is odd to me, but that's the way they enjoy it.
Okay.
If you let that happen, you're basically drinking flat beer.
Yeah.
When foam dissipates into beer, it's on the flat side.
Yeah.
So that's why Milikos are typically for a quick drink situation, because you want to drink the foam. Yeah.
It's fun to me. For me, it's usually the last one of the night.
It's usually the intent. Yeah. It's like a schnit or a snit. It's like, you're kind of done. You might want to hang out a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like the Czechs call it like a dessert.
Yeah. So you're giving this talk today. Do you have a call to action for brewers? Is there, or maybe not even in the in the talk itself, but as I'm now just going to refer to you as the voice of Czech beer in America.
My only goal today is to share what we've done.
Yeah.
Right? We've been doing this now for we've been doing decoction, open fermentation for a decade. We've been making Czech lager in not optimal conditions before that. We were just trying to find our way around it. And so I just want to share our experiences, what we do, what options there are, so that when you walk away, if you don't have the equipment capabilities, maybe you could think about how you could start moving towards that. If you're a brewer who maybe wants to start their own brewery someday, you could take from this and understand it a little bit better. Or if you're making Czech lager now, there's a couple of things you just missed because you just didn't have enough time. Maybe you can take a couple of key points away and implement these.
Yeah.
So I have no other real goal other than sharing what we have. I mean, I've been at this for a long effing time.
Yeah.
And I finally gotten to the point where I don't want to be a gatekeeper. Share everything. Just share it. Makes us all better.
I'm mindful of your time, but like I don't even think we really talked about it, but I'm clearly seeing a lot more dark lagers, Czech dark lagers, and you're making excellent examples of them. Aside from malt, are there key differences? Are there?
So Czech lager in particular?
Yeah. I don't even know if I'm phrasing this question the right way. But
it's hard to answer because almost like pale lager, there's pretty wide differences in what you can get there. Some of the some of the old school versions are sweetened.
Okay.
They're terrible.
Like intentionally sweetened.
Sweetened.
Okay.
They're horrible. And then the varieties that aren't can be, Tomave or Chernay. They're kind of interchangeable there. They're not really different beers. It's up to the brewer to decide. So those can be bitter in a really pleasant way or not.
Yeah.
It can be sweet. Some can be a little bit drier. So there's like variances there. Where Dunkel or Schwarzbier, like there's you kind of know what you're getting.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of variance there. But they've had a resurgence, I think, in the Czech Republic just with the interest in beer in general. Like when I first went there 20 plus years ago, it was hard to find examples of dark lager. They were there, but you had to look for them. You could not find Pol Tomave anywhere. I did not see it at all. It was like this mystery to me. It was actually a style. And now that's coming back, as a resurgence as well. So.
Okay. Is that American-led influence or global influence, or is it just people coming back to tradition? Do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I really can't. I don't know what way it went.
Okay.
I just know I've seen them more.
Yeah.
In a way I haven't. I guess I say that some of the ambers that I saw there when I first went there were basically like higher strength. They were like, Christmas beer or something like that.
Okay.
Like 14 Plato, 16 Plato.
Fun.
Yeah.
If people, for the beer drinkers that want that more immersive experience, and not necessarily just going to Prague, if they're going to visit the country, if they're going to try to immerse themselves in the beer culture in the Czech Republic, where do you encourage them to go and seek out?
It's still worthwhile to go to the old school joints in Prague. I was in Prague this past fall, and it is touristy as I've ever seen it. And it was a bit, even though it was Thanksgiving.
Sure.
Maybe that was because it was Thanksgiving. Not that they have that, but
I was going to say
it was getting into holiday market time.
Okay. Yeah.
It was jammed. It was hard, right? And it wasn't the funnest experience. But I still went to the old school joints because they're still valid. They're still valid. And Ufleku was the great place to go get a dark lager. You have to go there. The place has been there since the 1400s, and it's gorgeous. And the beer, it's the best dark lager in the country, I think, right?
Yeah.
And you still got to go to the old school beer halls that are there, right? And they may be rough and ready. You may not be treated that well.
Yeah.
But you got to go do it.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole, within the last, 10, 15 years, there's a whole new school of restaurateurs and breweries that are building on the Czech traditions, and they're doing it in a really fun way. All right, they're still paying homage to the history, but they're modernizing it a little bit, for lack of a better term. But also get out of the city center, go to the neighborhoods, go to Pilsen.
Yeah.
Just get out.
Okay.
And go explore. I know there's so much to do. It's hard. Like you can go to Prague for a long weekend and feel like you've saw everything, but you haven't seen anything.
Yeah, I've only been there for I think 2 days.
Yeah,
and
it can be overwhelming.
I was too young to appreciate any of it. I think I was maybe like 23, like when I was there. So like, I didn't know fuck all, and I was focused on American beer and American beer culture. So like, fuck it.
One cool thing that's happening. The one call I want to have is that typically you went to a pub and it was owned by a brewery and that was all you had. And that's kind of the Tide House thing is kind of relaxing a little bit. I don't know why, but I went to one bar called Pult, P-U-L-T, and they have nothing but 6 pale lagers on. That was it. Okay. 6 pale lagers from different regional breweries. Fucking heaven. Yeah. Sorry, I swore.
No,
it
took
me all this time.
That's fine. That's fine. I told you.
I mean, talk about that. When do you ever see just 6 pale lagers from regional brewery? And that was in the Czech Republic. It was great. And then you could really sense a difference between they were all 6.
I was going to ask. Yeah.
Wildly different. IBU, alcohol, flavor profile, dry, sweet, the whole deal. It's great. Love it.
I can't remember if we've had this conversation before. Have I ever asked you the green door question?
The green door question?
Then probably not.
I don't think so.
Okay.
This sounds scary.
No, it's not. So the premise is, at the early part of the pandemic, my wife and I started rewatching the television show The Good Place because it was just, feel-good TV in times of chaos. And in the final season of this show, they introduce a concept of the green door where the characters can walk through it and be doing whatever they want, wherever they want. So I came up with this question of if we had a green door on our plane of existence and this conversation ended and you could walk through it and be at any pub or brewery anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Who would you want to be with? And what would you like to be drinking?
That's a hard question.
Yeah. Thanks for being a regular listener of the show. But yeah, that's fine. I've asked this question for like 5 years now.
Being from Boston.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Doyle's in Washington Street in Jamaica Plain.
Okay.
Pre-Prohibition, if it was there at the time. It was an old pub.
Yeah.
I have this thing. I want to taste beers from the U.S. before Prohibition hit from large regional producers. They could be terrible.
Yeah.
Right? But I want to know what it was like. Corn lagers are being produced.
Yeah.
In an old school Boston institution, or that could even be Jake Worth's downtown, which is now gone too. And so I went to those places as a kid and just imagine what it was like when, there were regional producers, providing beer there, and that's long gone. So yeah, that'd be fun to be able to go way back in time. But can I have like a B? Like,
sure.
I would like to go then look at one of those pre-Prohibition breweries and get a tour at the same time.
Yeah,
which I kind of just did. I was just at Yuengling, so I kind of already had that.
That's wild, isn't it? Yeah, the Pottsville, Pottstown. Yeah, that is.
I got a tour on a Sunday when they weren't in production, and it was just fascinating.
Yeah.
So my answer is I really love old school U.S. regional breweries.
Yeah.
And because we've lost most of them, I just have this like thirst for knowledge about what the beers tasted like. So I would want to go drink it in like Doyle's. I think would be where I want to go.
Awesome. I like that answer. That's a good one. Chris Lohring, thanks for being the voice of Czech beer in America. It's critically important, and we're all the wealthier for you having that mantle.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much. Someone else take the baton.
Questions, comments, guest suggestions, you can email me at johnholl@allaboutbeer.com. That's JOHNHOLL @allaboutbeer.com. I do my best to respond to every email, so please reach out. And the only way, as I've said before, that we can keep doing this show or other shows and pay writers for original articles is with your help. Please visit allaboutbeer.com/support to learn more. A reminder, go visit allaboutbeer.com where you can check out the podcast page, the merch page, and read great new content, as well as our archives, which go all the way back to 1979. All About Beer is also on social media at All About Beer. And before we run, here is a word from this week's sponsor. Don't stop at just stickers and labels. Stomp Stickers has everything you need for festival season. From canopy tents to flags to table covers and banners. It's all waiting for you on their website. Check out their brewery section for the full lineup. Don't forget about the All About Beer podcast channel. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And also, go to probrewer.com each week for original articles from the All About Beer team. As for this show, Mitch Weber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Holl. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.